Lieutenant Commander Shelby took over Borg analysis 6 months ago. Captain Picard's culture is based on freedom and self-determination. And Data scolds Wesley Crusher on poker etiquette. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 26. Yep, that episode is finally here. The Best of Both Worlds, Part 1, written by Michael Piller, directed by Cliff Bull. This was June 16th, 1990. Where were you? We have a very special guest today. You know her from Picard Season 3 as Admiral Shelby, as well as Lieutenant Commander Shelby herself. It's Elizabeth Dennehy. How are you today, Elizabeth?
Good. How are you?
So good.
Great.
And thank you so much for hanging out with us. It is truly an honor. This is very, very exciting. I remember this episode from way back when, so I cannot wait to get into it. So let's not wait. First and foremost, can you just tell all of us, this is one of your first credits. Do you remember the audition process? Do you remember reading your sides and getting kind of an idea and thinking, I am so going to nail this one? What was that all about? Do you remember that?
Yes, it's okay. I have to do a little bit of a backstory leading up to this, and it's embarrassing. I'm a little bit ashamed. I was a sci-fi snob. I never had any interest in science fiction whatsoever. I went to an all-girls school on Long Island, New York, and let's just say that the people who were interested in the original series were not the cool kids.
Oh yeah.
Get the idea? An all-girl Catholic school, and the girls who were interested in Star Trek, the original series, were brilliant. They were the mathematicians. They were the people who were the president of the school. They were the scientists, but they were not cool. And of course, if you wanted to be cool, sci-fi meant that you were a nerd, you know? And so we're talking like the 70s. I think that Comic-Con made being a sci-fi nerd cool. I think it was sort of that way up until Comic-Con. All of a sudden, everybody's going down to Comic-Con, and cosplay was like with really hot people. And it was like, wow, what's happening? But when I was growing up, it was not for me. My thing growing up was so funny. We were just talking about London, an Anglophile. I was into the Six Wives of Henry VIII, upstairs, downstairs, Merchant Ivory movies, Shakespeare. I was really into that kind of period stuff, and Brideshead Revisited was my jam. And so when I moved out to LA, and I was 28, I got that audition, just like I've had many, many, many auditions. It was just another audition, in other words, and a little bit, it's really embarrassing to admit that I was like, Star Trek? Really? Seriously? Okay, whatever. I was really an asshole. I was very full of myself and haughty, and it wasn't Shakespeare, so I kind of looked down my nose at it, even though Patrick Stewart is like huge Shakespearean. I know how I'm embarrassed. I really am ashamed to admit that. But having said that, I think that kind of disdain was right for Shelby, and that if I had the appropriate level of respect and intimidation for what it actually was, I don't think I would have been as right for the character as they saw something. So does that make any sense? I think that disdain that I had, that haughtiness, is Shelby. Just like, I don't care who you are. Yep. I don't care your status. I don't care your rank. I've got a problem to solve. Where's your problem to solve it? So
absolutely.
I remember just being kind of like, whatever about it, and going in there. And I remember seeing in the waiting room an actress who made me go, oh shit, I should have maybe looked at this a little bit. And it was Joanna Pakula, who had just made a huge splash in Gorky Park.
Okay.
So William, this is all before you were even born. Stuff I'm talking about before you were even born. Gorky Park, starring William Hurt, and coincidentally, my father. Joanna Pakula everybody was talking. She was on everybody's list, and she was in the waiting room. And I went, oh my God, this is a big deal. I had no idea. That brought me up short. I was like, "Ooh, God." So I remember the audition. I don't remember a callback, but there must have been a callback. Um, and yeah, I was really, really surprised to get it. And I remember reading the script for part one, not part two, but for part one, and just being like, okay, whatever. And I got on the set and was in the makeup trailer, and I met Jonathan Frakes, and I was like, oh, you're Riker. Oh, I wasn't sure if it was the baldy guy. Oh, you're Riker. Yeah. I know it sounds so clueless and disparaging, but before there was the internet where you could just look up I couldn't go on YouTube and find old series to get get up to speed on it. That none of that existed. There was not even cell phones. So without that instant being able to research and get up to speed on things, like now my son, who's an actor, he auditions for The Bear, and it's like, all right, pull up the old episodes and get up to speed. Who is everybody? You couldn't do that back then. So I was clueless and just walked into the deep end without, having any idea of what I got myself into.
Wow.
So that's my memory of
Wow.
the very first part of like getting the job.
You don't look clueless on screen.
Nope.
On screen, you look professional and fantastic. You have bravado about you that intimidates Riker to a degree. And this being early in your career, it's amazing that you're able to muster up this level of confidence to me, because it almost feels like your show when you walk on. What was the what was it like working opposite Riker Jonathan Frakes, once you started filming?
So that confidence that you mentioned could be confidence, but it could also be absolute abject ignorance of just like, Star Trek, whatever, just totally like I said, if I was a fan, I think I would have been shitting my pants. I would have been like, oh my God, this is a huge thing. I've got to really learn my lines. And which that nervousness and desperation would have been anti-Shelby. So in a way it was confidence, but it was also just like, what are you talking about? What do you mean this is a big deal? Kind of just blind ignorance. So when I showed up on the set and I met Jonathan, he had worked with my father and knew him back in the early days. They did theater together in New York. So he was just like incredibly respectful, could not have been lovelier. Had this huge trailer, and it was like, if you need anything, you use my trailer, because
Wow.
I had a little dink one. Just was incredible, really sweet. And we were running lines and stuff like that. And he said, you have absolutely no idea what's about to happen to you, what's in store for you. Talking about? What are you talking about? It's just a job. And I don't know where I got this, what could have played off as confidence, but it was absolute ignorance. I had only ever done at that point commercials, and it was on The Guiding Light. I was on a soap opera for
Nice.
a year, where I was a dressing room mate and best buddy with Michelle Forbes.
Nice.
What?
Yeah, she and I were on The Guiding Light together, and we shared a dressing room. And I was actually just talking to her on the phone yesterday for a long time. Best bud, like OG, we go way, way, way back. And so that was my experience on Star Trek. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories that are really, really wake me up in a cold sweat, like cringe stories. So when I showed up on the set, and Jonathan knew me and he knew my dad, and he was so lovely. And when he said, you have no idea what's going to happen, I didn't know what he was talking about. And of course, he was talking about conventions and the fanaticism and how people were really, really going to care about this. And I was just like, whatever, just like, whatever. I was so stupid. I was so clueless. So I was about to get my comeuppance, my big moment of, oh my God. The very first scene we shot was the ready room Projections suggest that a Borg ship like this one could continue to function effectively even if 78% of it were rendered inoperable. I will never forget that line for as long as I live.
Apparently.
Because I could
Wow.
not say it. I could not say it on the day. Could not get it out of my mouth. Then, like, after the 5th time, and everybody in the show is like that, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be fired. I'm going to be fired. It was so embarrassing. That was my first scene, and I had a terrible
Wow.
time. I was talked about this on the Ready Room with Will Wheaton and Jonathan. Like, I crumbled and was just absolutely fell apart. And the more I tried, the worse it got. It was terrible. And that was my first day. And I think nowadays they would have fired me. I don't think they spend time wasting time on people who don't deliver. So that was really.
I don't know about that. That was, you said 5 takes? Was it something like 5 takes? That's not that many takes.
And we went on. At 5 takes was when I completely fell apart inside, like confidence gone out the window. It was probably more like 25 takes after that. It was bad.
Wow.
It was really, really bad. And I'll tell you, I'm going to get really into the weeds, and this is maybe more information than you even want to know.
Great.
So on a TV show and on film, when you have a single camera show, they have a camera and they you rehearse and you set your marks, hit your mark. This is where the lights are going to be. And you rehearse with everybody on the cast. And then you go back into the makeup and hair trailer and you get your hair and makeup done while they are lighting and marking the camera moves. So, and then when you get your hair finished and your makeup finished and the lights are all figured out, then you go back in and you shoot that scene. I did not know that. On the soap opera, you shot in order from the beginning of, depending on the set. And if you were a big star, they did your scenes on that set all in a row so that you could leave. And then if you were way down the food chain, you were there all day. So I had all day to learn my lines because I was only on the show for a year. I wasn't like a big established star. So I would learn all my lines on the day on the set because it would be 4 or 5 o'clock by the time they would get to my scenes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was used to. And that's what I thought was going to happen. I didn't realize when they said, okay, we're ready for you. And I was like, what? We're ready to shoot that scene that we just rehearsed? Thinking that I had all this time to learn my lines. I was so stupid. And I was so happy that when they did the Blu-ray release, that Cliff Bowl and I did running commentary. And I got to tell him, I said, I was so mortified. And he said, why didn't you say something? And I said, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know until that moment that we were going to shoot that scene right now that we just rehearsed. And I thought, oh, they just were figuring out where the place went. Now they're going to rehearse all the scenes in the whole episode. And then we're going to come back to that scene and shoot it. The haughtiness came back to bite me in the ass.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been so stressful, though. I'm getting stressed hearing about it when they're like, all right, we're ready for your scene. And you're like, whoa,
what?
I am not ready.
I thought I had all day. Yeah, I had a heart attack. And of course, I was too embarrassed to tell anybody. So when my son went to college for theater at the DePaul University in Chicago, I was like, make sure people tell you how to read a call sheet. Make sure people tell you that you're going to rehearse and then shoot the scenes in order. And right out of school, his first job was on Chicago Med, and he was the entire episode. And I said, sit down. I have to tell you something really important. I told him that story. Because nobody tells you this stuff when you're in school. It's ridiculous. When you're a theater major, you think your whole life is going to be doing nonstop Shakespeare plays and, Moliere and, Death of a Salesman. And then you get hired by a TV show, and there's the first time I heard Hit Your Mark, I had no idea what they were talking about. So.
Well, Elizabeth, can I tell you something? You've got all these stories about practically catastrophe, not knowing all of your lines, messing up the lines at first. But let me tell you something. Watching this show as a kid and watching all of the Star Trek series, Shelby is definitely a top 5 guest star, in my opinion, in all of the Star Trek series. For me, one of the most memorable Star Trek characters ever, with some of the best lines. And you left such a strong impression on me when I was first dipping my toes into Star Trek. This episode and your character did a huge amount in the way of getting me into that world of thinking, whoa, this is really good. One line specifically, maybe a top 5 or top 10 most memorable line to me when I was first watching it, and still to this day, was "You're in my way." I was like, man, this is good eating. I wanted to eat that line. It was so good, and you delivered it so well. I was so excited about this. So my question to you is, what was the reaction afterwards? Were you prepared for it? How quickly did you realize, whoa, this is a pretty big situation, especially because this was the final episode, and then people had to wait for 3 months, and they're like, you can't end here. What's going on? Did you get that reaction in the summer of 1990? Was it 20 years later at a convention? When was that?
Okay, so there's a lot there, what you just said. First of all, something that I don't think a lot of people realize is that we only had the first script. We didn't have the second script. When we shot part 1, we had no idea what was going to happen.
Wow.
No clue. We were waiting too, those 3 months. It wasn't until I was in New York that summer, and then I went back to LA. And because this was before the internet, where scripts had to be mailed to you and they were watermarked, and it was like, top secret, just crazy security. When Jonathan and I were talking about the relationship between these two characters, first of all, it was the first time they'd ever had a cliffhanger. One of the things that we talked about was we had no idea where this relationship was going to go. And we had no idea if they were going to end up falling in love with each other, or was I a Borg in disguise? We had no clue. And was I a villain or a hero? So you had to kind of play all of that all at once in case of any option that they chose. So all of those little smart smirks, like when I say Data, scramble the phaser frequencies, keep them changing, and then Picard comes up and puts his hand on my shoulder, and I have that little smug, self-satisfied, all those little looks and all those little moments and all those little, is she a good person or is she not, was on purpose because we had no idea what it was going to turn into. Wow. And so what that allows you to do is play a 360-degree character of somebody who could have ulterior motives. What agenda is she working? But I think it made the audience lean in.
Mm-hmm.
Where is this going? I don't know how to feel about this person. And I'm trying to remember when it was aired. It was aired in the summer. Did part 1 air and then part 2? Of course, it was a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I don't think I did any conventions in between. But my very first convention was in St. Louis, Missouri, and it was with George Takei, and I was scared to death. I was terrified. Not because of people thinking they didn't like my character. I was terrified because I thought that Star Trek fans would think I was an imposter and I didn't deserve the part because I wasn't a true fan of the medium, of the genre, that and that I would get on stage, and people did do this. People did say, so when you were on the Borg ship, what was your phaser frequency set at? And I was like, you tell me what it was set at. I have no idea. You know more than I do. I was afraid people were going to think I was an imposter and I didn't deserve. But what I was not prepared for was, oh, I hated you. You were such a bitch. The vitriol and the animosity was really scary and shocking. And people walking by my table, not wanting my autograph, like despised me. That was really shocking. And they would say, "You were such a bitch to Riker." And I would say, "But was I right?" I was right. And that was 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, 1990. Now I go to conventions and people are like, "I love you. Were such a strong female. You didn't care if people liked you or not. You really did the right thing and you stood up and you didn't care. You didn't try to make it seem like the man's idea." So look at how much things have changed in 30 years.
Totally.
30 years ago, you didn't have nevertheless, she persisted, right? People, how people have become pro-feminists overall. And that was sort of unheard of back then, that a woman would not care if she was liked or not, and would come in strong with these ideas, go in over your boss's head, do an end run around him. So, which brings me back to the original line. When we were shooting that, Jonathan and I, being very, very careful to be ambiguous enough that people would be guessing, where's this woman coming from? We purposely ran the scenes and they were very quiet. "You're in my way. I don't have to yell. I don't have to work hard. It's effortless. Yes, you're 6'4", whatever, how tall you are, but I am going to crush you. I am the boss." And so if I had been loud or if I had been yelly, it would have been, it would have undermined the power and the strength. And she had a really strong inner power where it's effortless. Her power is effortless. And also, I have to tip the hat to Cliff Bole, who gave me one of the best acting notes I've ever received in my life. And I said that to him on the Blu-ray. When we were, I think it was that scene, all you knew how to do is play it safe. I suppose that's why someone like you sits in the shadow of a great man, passing up one command after another. When we were doing that scene, Jonathan, who is much taller than me, he's really tall. He's like 6'5". He's very tall. I'm 5'6". And what Cliff said was that I was doing the scene and I was looking up at him, and he said, "It makes you look like a little kid." He said, "So I want you to plant your feet firmly on the ground, root yourself, and look straight ahead as if you're looking at him directly in the eye." And I did that, and all of a sudden, I found the whole character with that note. I found exactly who she was. That was a brilliant, brilliant note, because when you look up at somebody on camera, it is a very weak position. Whereas if you look them square in the eye, even though I couldn't do that, that I'm indebted to him for forever for that. So that was a very long answer, but there was a lot in that moment, a lot of preparation, a lot of thought went into that moment. And the reaction to it, like you brought up, was off-putting at first, but really delightful to see how, and I meet kids, I meet 13 and 14-year-old girls who see her as a role model. That was happening 30 years ago when I would go to conventions. So I'm very glad that you brought that up. It's really, the world, it changes slowly, very slowly, but I do think things are getting better.
You led the way.
You led the way. Yeah, you did. You're one of the people that paved the way for this kind of a strong female character that we, that it took society a while to catch up to, but you were not afraid to make those choices. Something that we've talked with the Nana visitor and her character about, having to kind of face that same criticism because people didn't want to see a strong female character. And so they called you a bitch, or they said you were, off-putting for whatever reason, for those kinds of reasons. But thank God we've gotten to a place where seeing somebody who's ambitious, somebody who's smart and confident and knows what they want and knows what they're about can find support. I also want to credit you for the way you said that line too. I wrote it down in my notes. "You're in my way." It was so so goal oriented, because um, I watch boxers now and they talk about they're up for a big fight and they say, well, it's not about the person that I'm fighting, whether I like them or dislike them. They're in my way for
Yep.
whatever goal I want to accomplish. So it's just a matter of mathematics. I want to say to you, you seem to have like almost a perfect memory of your lines, because you are snapping and recalling these lines like as if you just read the script today. And I want to ask you, uh, the ability to grasp Star Trek techno babble, setting your frequencies on this, and you mentioned 78% of the field and this and that. I mean, these are abstract concepts that we're not really scientifically able to grasp, but the way you say it with such confidence, as if you know what you're talking about, is something we always commend on this show. The grasp of Star Trek techno babble. What was it that helped you master this particular this ability to do the techno babble and kind of run through it with such kind of you know authority?
Well, first of all, I don't remember lines from any other TV show I ever did. Uh, I don't have a Rolodex. You don't even know what a Rolodex. I don't have a computer in my brain that has. I don't. But I'm helped by the fact that I have been doing conventions and talking about the show up for 30 years, a lot, and so that helps. But it's true that those lines the one that I couldn't remember, I will never forget now because it took up so much real estate in my brain. But there's another line that took me hours and hours and hours to learn. So first I must preface this by saying, after that disastrous first day, I went home and I learned all of the lines for the entire episode in my bones. And there's a difference between learning lines enough to get by the day, through the day, but to know them in your bones so that you never ever forget them and you cannot say them wrong. That's a whole different thing. First of all, I've always had a facility for learning lines, and I thank the guiding light for that, having to learn 40 pages a night. But Star Trek is really interesting. There's another line that took me so long to learn, which was separate the saucer section, assign a skeleton crew to create a diversion. Not that long, right?
Mm-mm.
But it was so hard to get the muscles in my mouth to move in the right direction, the muscle memory. And then what finally happened was I had to picture it, separate the saucer section, right? Separate it from the ship, from the Enterprise. Assign a skeleton crew to create a diversion. It actually makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when I pictured the movie in my mind of what I was saying, it then made sense, made logical sense, and was much, much easier to remember.
But these are tongue twisters too, though. Assign a skeleton group, like that's
saucer section. Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Separate the saucer section. Try that.
Well, we heard you say it like 10 times, so we can do it now. But
but definitely a tongue twister. I would give you that 100%.
There's a trick. If you have a line with a lot of S sounds, what I learned was you have to say each word separately from each other. Separate the saucer section. Assign a skeleton crew to create a diversion. Every single word stands completely on its own. When I talked about the muscle memory, then once I was able to say the words in the correct order without separate, without that, then it was faster and faster and faster. It was all muscle memory, and it was just like learning a musical passage. If you were playing an instrument, you go over and over and over and over again, something that's really difficult so that your fingers are always going in the right direction. It was exactly, I don't play an instrument, but this is what I'm assuming. I have some, I've learned really difficult passages. It was, it took hours and hours and hours to get it that casual, to make it sound, I don't know how Brent Spiner did it, but this was the way I did it. And Brent and LeVar, God, their brains. I was just like, oh my God, how do you do that? I only had to learn 2 scripts. Yeah, so that it's very interesting that you brought that up. There's the intention aspect of that actually makes sense. Separate the saucer section, assign a skeleton crew to create a diversion. But then there's the technical aspect, which is every word separate on its own, and then when you get the lips moving in the right way, you can go faster. But it was crazy.
That's really interesting that you say that, because, and we only have you for a minute left here, but it leads into exactly what I want to bring up, because the person that I heard doing the S's and really enunciating the words very clearly, more than anybody I've ever heard besides, or in that regard, is somebody by the name of Avery Brooks. I would notice it and I would study it. I'd say he really separates those words, especially when there's an S sound leading into an SH or something. He wants to make it clear what he's saying. And everybody knows Avery Brooks was Captain Sisko, played Cirroc's dad, the man over Cirroc's shoulder, for 7 years. The premise of Star Trek Deep Space Nine was created from this episode that we just saw, because Admiral Hansen says we're moving to intercept the Borg at Wolf 359. Star Trek Deep Space Nine in January of 1993 starts off with the Battle of Wolf 359, where Cirroc loses his mother, Captain Sisko, Commander Sisko at the time, loses his wife, and that sets the premise for the entire 7 years of Star Trek. So we'll definitely be covering that a little bit more in the second segment. Yeah.
Avery Brooks, theater actor, Shakespearean, which is why he had the skills and the technique to be able to get the words out and make it sound like this is the way we talk.
Amazing.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Elizabeth,
I think, I want to say you did a fantastic job in this episode. No, I want to give you your flowers. Excellent job. I really enjoyed this episode. Loved your performance in this episode. I said, finally, Riker has met his match. I love the moment too at the end or towards the end of this episode, where you tell Riker he can't go on the away mission because he's too important to the bridge. And he's basically like, those are my orders, and Troy has to step in, and say, actually,
it's inappropriate.
She used the word inappropriate.
Yes. Yeah. So it was such a great match.
I love to remind people that Riker says in the episode, she reminds me of me. I used to be like that. I miss this thing about me, right? So he doesn't hate me. He doesn't despise me. No. He has admiration.
He loves it. Finally, a match for Riker. It was so good. And once again, like you mentioned about the leaving it ambivalent and not really knowing where we're going to go, I have that exact feeling. I don't know where. I haven't seen the second episode that follows this one up. I don't know where this is going to go for all, No,
that's what the beauty of this one. Cirroc is watching The Next Generation for the first time ever. I'm actually wearing my Sisko family shirt in honor of this episode launching Deep Space Nine. There's Cirroc. Avery.
Wow.
So this is a lot of fun
so
for us.
I'm just like, whoa, what's going to happen here? There's a lot going on.
So glad spoilers. Did I do any spoilers?
No, you didn't do any spoilers. It was perfect. It was perfect.
And we're going to make Cirroc wait all summer long.
I'm going to have to wait. No, this is perfect. I've heard so much build up to this episode. I mean, I've heard the title of this episode mentioned, 100 times. People mentioning this amongst the great episodes of Star Trek. And it's been a pleasure to talk with you about your experience in this episode, to watch you perform in this episode, and really pave the way for what would become something we see a lot of, which is strong female leads characters in Star Trek. It actually becomes known for that at some point, and I would dare to say that you're one of the first to do that. So, just pleasure, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, Elizabeth, we absolutely cannot thank you enough. This has been such an honor. I never would have thought 30 years ago or whatever it was that I would have you and right in front of me to where I can talk with you and say, whoa, you delivered those lines so beautifully, but you really did. We truly appreciate you, your work, and you taking the time today to hang out with us and talk with us and our listeners and viewers. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. You are amazing.
Maybe I'll see you in Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah.
And everybody at home, stick around. Let us know in the comments below how amazing you think Elizabeth is. And if you agree, top 5 guest star ever in Star Trek. We will be right back on The Seventh Rule.